We have started the recording. Well, good morning. This is the June 26, 2026 Colorado Produced Water Consortium meeting. It's a special meeting. I appreciate everyone's willingness to take time out of their Friday to get through the agenda that we weren't quite able to get through. And we had our meeting a couple of weeks ago in Trinidad. That was a really good meeting. Really appreciate the participation of folks that were able to come down in person and those who were able to join us online. Um, Always good to see things in the field, to be in the communities that are impacted by some of the work that we're doing, and hear from those community members in the process of the meeting. Really appreciate everyone's participation, really appreciate the thoughts that were shared with us. And looking forward to the discussion today. Really, what I'm hoping to accomplish today that we didn't accomplish at the last meeting is kind of looking forward into 2027 and beyond, and some of the things that we may be working on, and starting to line those out a little bit. I know that there are some consortium members that have some ideas. I also have some ideas on things that we need to be considering to work on over the next year or so. But before we get into that, I'm going to hand it over to Director Dalton for some housekeeping.
Thank you, Chair. So it's been a while since we've all been fully virtual. So just as a reminder, raise your hand and you can find the icon when you hover on the bottom of your screen to raise your hand, and Chair Messner will call on you. When you are speaking, remember to state your name. Some members of the public may not be able to see your name, so state your name. This is the end of our our state fiscal year. So for your per diems, if you are requesting a per diem, please contact me immediately after this meeting. We need to get those expense forms signed today. And it's a really tight deadline. Just remember, contact me today for your per diem. I would like to give Jennifer Walker Graff, who is the Assistant Director for Energy Innovation and listens in for the Department of Natural Resources here on the consortium. She didn't get a chance to introduce herself fully to everyone in Trinidad. I'd like her to introduce herself, and I also want to announce that she will become the acting ECMC Director on July 24th. Jennifer?
Thank you, Director Dalton. Hello, Consortium. My name is Jennifer Walker Graff, and I'm currently the Assistant Director for Energy Innovation in the Executive Director's Office. I've worked really closely with Director Dalton and Dr. Sedlacko and Chair Messner since the fall when I joined DNR. I've gotten to know the consortium through those relationships and the special work that you do, and I want to say thank you. I can recognize the unique blend of experience, technical experience, and community lived experience that you bring to this really important work. And I'm looking forward to supporting it in my new role as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Assistant Director Walker Graff. Rick McCurdy is a consortium member. Rick, are you on the call?
Yes, I am.
Okay, I would like, Rick has requested to fill us in on the DOE study that he mentioned in Trinidad. Rick?
Thank you, Director Dalton. Let me start off by saying it's a study that's been requested by the Department of Energy. The study's being handled by the National Petroleum Council. And for those of you that may not be aware, the NPC, and I'll use that abbreviation instead of going and continually saying National Petroleum Council, NPC was stood up approximately 80 years ago in the Department of Interior, and then when the Department of Energy was created, it was rolled into it. It serves strictly as a source of information for the Secretary of the Department of Energy and his executive branch. So anytime they have a question or they want to know more information and go in depth about a subject, they hand it over to the NPC to assemble a study group and put together a white paper on the topic. So at the time, Assistant Secretary Kyle Hosfett, who was over the Office of Hydrocarbon and Geothermal Energy, he had requested a study in the very end of last year from the NPC regarding produced water in the U.S. and where produced water could potentially impact America's energy dominance in the future. And that would be a negative impact, of course. That's what he's concerned with. So the NPC stood up their study. It's in two layers. There is the study group. The study group is a lot of the CEOs of the various companies that are members of the NPC. And then below that level is the coordinating subcommittee, or as I refer to us as the worker bees. So the worker bees are the ones actually in charge of gathering information, writing the report, and then eventually we will hand it upstairs in its near final form to the study group, who will edit or bless it, and then they will hand it over to the Department of Energy. The study group currently is, or CSC is currently composed of 6 task groups. Task group 1 is the study integration group. It's the CSC chair and co-chair, the 6 task group leads, and NPC staff, plus a DOE representative. They're the ones that are going to look at all the information being gathered and decide how it should be assembled into this final report. Task group 2 is baseline assessment. That is a task group that looked at all the basins in the U.S. and kind of prioritized which ones probably might possibly cause the biggest issue, because ultimately we will not address every basin in the U.S. We'll address like the top 2 or 3, or 3 or 4 possibly. Task group 3 is maximizing existing disposal options. That's the task group that I lead. Task group 4 is characterization and treatment of produced water. Task group 5 is expanding frac reuse of produced water. And then task group 6, which was originally part of task group 3, is beneficial reuse. But we decided that was going to be such a big topic that we moved it out and made it its own task group. So they'll be reporting on where we currently stand in terms of desalinization and potential beneficial reuse. Timeline is, we've been working on this now since late February, early March. The task group 1, so the CSC leads and all that, we actually, all the work's being done virtually. We have a weekly Teams meeting for every task group. Trust me, it is a schedule hog. But the CSC and the task group leads, we have met so far face-to-face twice. One was in DC at the NBC offices a little over a month ago. Another was week before last week, or actually last week. So before, well, how many weeks ago was it we were in Trinidad? So that same week, the NPC team was meeting in Midland. And so I was there and then flew up to Colorado. The next meeting will be July 28th, and we're going to meet at the National Energy Technology Lab in Pittsburgh. And then sometime late August will be our final, probably face-to-face, when we will meet in DC again. And we hope to have our portion of the writing completed by no later than the end of September. It will be handed up to the study group after that. They will have all of October to look at it, make any changes, and then they have a commitment to get it to DOE by mid to late November. So that's where we stand. I can currently say now that we have, will be assessing the Permian is #1 basin that's being looked at. And for those that are not aware, a little tidbit of information: if the Permian Basin, that little section of West Texas and southeastern New Mexico, was carved out and was its own little nation, it'd be the 4th largest oil producing nation in the world. So it's very critical to the U.S., and thus the DOE has a tremendous amount of interest. Other two basins are going to be uh, Gulf Coast, so predominantly Haynesville, maybe some Eagleford, down in the South Texas coast. And third basin will be the Appalachian Basin, so it will be the Marcellus and Utica. And of course, both those have a strong focus from the LNG export side of the oil and gas industry. So, having said that, that's kind of the overview for now. Hopefully, when we meet again virtually in September, I can provide some more details about some of the decisions that have been made. Ultimately, uh, it is up to the study group to approve the report. So if we have not given the report to the study group at that time, I will not be able to comment on which direction and what recommendations we have made, but I might be able to give more details. And Chair Messner, I see we've got a couple of hands up.
Yeah, thanks, Rick. Appreciate the update. I see there's a couple of questions. If you're open to taking questions, we'll start with Michael Freeman.
Can't guarantee I can answer them, but I'll be open to taking them.
Thanks, Chair Mesner. And Rick, thanks for that update. This should be a pretty simple question. I appreciate you giving us this update, and this is good to know. Is there a website or any other kind of public-facing source of information that the public can access to sort of at least see what the status is or where the process is going?
So, Michael, my understand MPC does have a website, and that's where all their previous studies can be found. This one is not on there yet, as it's not completed.
Okay.
But eventually, when it is handed over to DOE, it will show up on that
Okay.
website.
So look at the NPC website for that then.
Yes, and I will make sure and give Director Dalton a note when I know that it has been finalized and handed up to DOE.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You bet.
I swear there was another hand, but now I don't see it.
Irene, okay, she's got her hand down. She said no, no question.
I had the same question basically, or if we could watch meetings or anything like that.
No, not yet, but eventually, and we won't have any virtual meetings, or we won't have any televised virtual meetings. But as again, just reiterating that once the report is finished, it will be made publicly available. And I don't see any others, Commissioners, so I will mute back up.
Great. Thanks, Rick. Really appreciate the update there and keeping us informed on the important work that you're doing. Director Dalton, was there anything else on your list?
No, Chair Messner. Just happy to be here. Happy to see all of you online.
Great. So next on the agenda, there's a number of folks I think that are in the meeting right now, and there are a number of folks that weren't able to make it down to Trinidad. But I'd like to provide an opportunity, should anyone be interested, to share any reflections or thoughts that you had as a result of both the tour that we took in the Raton Basin, Trinidad area, as well as the meeting that we held there, so that everyone can maybe get a little perspective that wasn't able to participate on kind of what we saw, what we heard, and your thoughts on that. And so I open the floor up to anyone that was on the tour. Again, I want to make sure to thank John Lipka, who is with us here today, for helping organize that meeting and the tours in the field, as well as the Los Animas County Commissioners that participated, the Mayor of Trinidad, and Representative Ty Winter, who all participated in the meeting and in the activities associated with us being down there. I thought it was a really good perspective of a part of the state that we hadn't had an opportunity to visit yet, and is uniquely different than other parts of the state that we have visited or have talked about in consortium meetings. And so thoughts from anyone that participated on the tour or in the meeting a couple of weeks ago? Raise your hand. Irene?
Hi, Irene Andress. Sure, I'll go ahead. So I think one of the things that struck me is we need to work at defining when produced water is a resource as opposed to a waste product. We need to classify the different types of produced water. Clearly, coal bed methane water is a whole lot different from anything out of the DJ. And we need to establish requirements and guidelines. Well, I mean, not the Produced Water Consortium. I mean, this needs to be done to establish requirements and guidelines for fit for purpose use products. So, like for dust suppression or firefighting, things of that nature. Those were my main thoughts.
Thanks, Irene. Rick?
Yeah, and I'll just follow up with what Irene said that while I was unable to make the tour, um, it was very enlightening to hear the passion that the local ranchers and everything had down there and their desire to use the coal bed methane water, in which Irene says, and I agree, is completely different than a lot of other oil field waters. And in many areas, that coal seam it actually holds the drinking water for our community. So I do think that's important. I do think those folks down in that country would be very grateful for the ability to use that water.
Thanks, Rick. Clay?
Yeah, Clay Terry. Um, thank you, Chair Messner. I obviously want to echo what Irene and Rick just stated. My impressions, among several things, were that as Rick noted, the passion that the ranchers and the operating community down there have toward the idea of wanting utilizing their produced water uh, in a variety of ways. Um, Agricultural at some level, certainly watering of livestock and wildlife and dust suppression, various things. The passion was evident, and it was essentially a community-wide support concept, which I thought was interesting, as opposed to I didn't really notice or identify any protesters of that concept. Obviously, a drought condition has a lot to do with people's perspective and attitudes in a short term. So I noted that, and I thought it was very worthwhile that we were able to see that. And obviously, we saw some applications on the tour that certainly made sense from a visual perspective and understanding the permitted discharge sites and how they've been handled and are being managed. I thought was exemplary of what the industry is capable of. So it raises the question for me as a consortium, and we have talked about this a little bit in the past, at least, of trying to be basin specific with our concerns and our recommendations. So it just brings to mind to me the issue of what can we do as a consortium to help identify the uniqueness of the Raton Basin and the needs for water there and the acceptance of the use of water there, not only from the public, but from the current CDPHE discharge permits. So what are the things that we can do to identify that uniqueness and help promote the ability to use water where conditions support that and it makes common sense. So
Thanks, Clay. Harmony?
I'm gonna echo what Clay just said because I feel it and I felt it so strongly with every public commenter. The need for the Produced Water Consortium to reevaluate our blanket statewide approach and recommendations and really highlights the need for a by-basin approach. And I'm going through the 1242 legislation where it talks about benchmarks for by basin with a focus on the DJ basin. And I thought I loved hearing about the trip to Trinidad. I wish I could have been there. I love these sort of things. And also, unpopular opinion maybe out here, it is the driest and hottest it's ever been. And I look at the amount of fresh water used in that area compared to what's used in the DJ Basin. And with our very limited time and resources, I think we really need to be putting our efforts and energy on what will reduce significant amounts of fresh water. And I hope that we prioritize that through the rest of the year.
Thanks, Harmony. Any other thoughts?
You can't see my hand, perhaps, against my background.
I don't see it, but go ahead, Barbara.
Yeah, I'll put it back up again. Um, yeah, I just would echo comments others have made, but with one caution. We saw water quality analytical results across the basin that would preclude making some blanket statement that coal bed methane is suitable for discharge without qualifying the source regarding the results of the analysis. And when we had the discussion, and I really appreciated the feedback from Evergreen Energy while we were in the meeting, that only about 30% of their produced water does not have a discharge permit, and that's for quality reasons. So with that sensitivity, whether we can recommend changes in regulations to recognize coal bed methane produced water as a resource rather than a waste, there still have to be guardrails on that for the quality. Thank you.
Thanks, Barbara. Carmia?
Good morning. This is Carmina Woolley with BLM. Um, I I thoroughly enjoyed our tour on Thursday when we were in Trinidad, and then also hearing from so many community members. Um, I I think I can speak for myself and many on the consortium that we heard everybody's voices, and basically the direction was tended to be all the same, right? From everybody who spoke. One thing that I would like to identify or have clarity on are the hurdles, the obstacles to produced water beneficial reuse. We heard that from a few folks, but I'm not sure I don't think I have a clear picture of what the challenges are. So if we can dive deeper into that and really pinpoint each instance or each step in the process that is challenging, that would definitely help me understand the situation, or at least in Trinidad. Thank you.
Thanks, Carmia. Any other thoughts? Well, thanks for sharing your thoughts. Later on in our discussion, I do hope to bring this topic back up and certainly have a discussion about what possible next steps would be, as we look forward to work that we're going to be working on in 2007, 2008. So stay tuned for that discussion. But before we get to that, I think we do have some public commenters, and so want to make sure that we create some time for that. Director Dalton, I'm not sure who we have or.
Thank you, Chair Messner. We have Commissioner Tony Haas from Los Animas County.
Okay. Is Commissioner Haas elevated so that he can provide? There he is. Go ahead, Commissioner, whenever you're ready. Happy to hear your thoughts.
Well, the main thing is I want to tell you all, thank you so much, Mr. Mesner, and the ladies and gentlemen of the consortium that made the effort to come here to Los Animas County and to see firsthand the beneficial use of that water that provides for our wildlife and our ranchers' cattle and even some irrigation. And also all the comments. I really appreciate the comments. Getting a little emotional here. It's been 25 years. This conversation's been going back and forth, and I'm so happy that you're here. Thank you for recognizing that the one size doesn't fit all for rules and regs. The Raton Basin is nothing like the DJ Basin, and I sincerely hope the rest of the consortium would consider a different approach and possibly grant an exemption for those produced wells that qualify for beneficial use in the Raton Basin. And just an interesting tidbit, the USDA was here yesterday at Los Animas County, made a visit, Sally Clark, the director, was here in person and telling us about money that might be available for different infrastructure. And I brought up this produced water, and would there be an avenue for these private property owners, the ranchers and farmers that are utilizing that water, if their water is just a little too high in salinity or possibly any other adverse mineral or whatever, that they could qualify for grants to actually develop some kind of cleansing system. And she said that's worthy of a conversation and recognize the importance of that water. So that's an interesting bit of information for you all to consider. And thank you again for coming to Los Animas County.
Thank you, Commissioner, and thank you for having us. It certainly was an impactful trip for us, I think, and really appreciate your comments. And I also think that there's some really interesting opportunities, and so hope to dive into that in our next discussion. And so, but thanks for sharing your thoughts. Director Dalton, is there anyone else that has signed up for public comment?
I don't see any other hands. If you're in the attendees, if you would like to make a public comment, please raise your hand. So I have one additional person raising their hand at this moment. That is Commissioner Felix Lopez from Los Animas County.
Okay. If we could elevate Commissioner Lopez. Commissioner Lopez, you are elevated and the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning. First of all, members of this consortium, we want to thank you on behalf of Los Animas County and, of course, all the ag and ranching communities, the producers that we have within the Raton Basin operate in a very, I believe, professional manner. And for that reason, of all the millions of gallons of water that are extracted on a yearly basis, any water that meets the CDPHE regulations in this particular time and era that we are going through, the drought that is impacting this part of the state and pretty much all the western part of the United States, it would be imperative to get the consortium to make a recommendation to the EMC to allow this water to be discharged for firefighting purposes. As I mentioned to all of you at the last meeting when you were here in Trinidad, and thank you for coming face to face. It's always good to put the name to the face. And we just finished fighting our sixth fire here in Los Animas County. We have the west part of the county that produces the water that could be used, if applicable and acceptable, that could be used for firefighting and other purposes. You know, Los Animas County at one point in time used to use some of the water for dust mitigation. The pristine wildlife that this part of the state has, it is so imperative and important for the well-being of those individuals that love the outdoors. So certainly there is so many more opportunities that we could be doing with this water rather than discharging it. And also with some of the opportunities that are on the table, the producers, and you heard from them, they would be willing to actually pond that water and allow for other users. You know, yesterday, as a fact, I was on my way about 7 miles west of Trinidad, if you can imagine that, and there was a herd of elk down by a river bottom, and that is 6, 7 miles. I have seen them closer to the community. One of the comments, and I'll close with this, one of the farming communities actually said on the Honey part, so that would be on the northeast part of Trinidad, Las Animas County, they are alfalfa growers, hay growers, and they are beginning to see a lot of wildlife go into their fields, obviously because there is nothing going on for them to eat up on the high country. So respectful members, simply would like the opportunity to invite you to draft a document to the powers to be that this water, if we need to have a window of exemptions, this is the perfect time to help wildlife, firefighting, dust mitigation, and agriculture. Thank you so much for your time, and you're welcome to visit us anytime in Las Animas County. We are the welcoming host to the all that are coming in from north, from the south part to the state of Colorado. So certainly an honor to have you all, and thank you for the opportunity to provide this comment.
Thank you, Commissioner. Appreciate you being here and hosting us a couple of weeks ago. Your thoughts are appreciated.
Chair Messner, there's no other raised hands.
Okay.
I think we're good to go.
Great. Well, I appreciate everyone that provided comment. So next on the agenda is kind of some time to share ideas as we look ahead to the remainder of 2026 into 2027 and even beyond. Over the last, I don't know how many years have we been doing this now, 2, 3 years. We've accomplished a lot as a consortium. We've had, dozens of legislative deliverables that we've been able to accomplish. We've looked at, other elements around disproportionately impacted communities and centralized produced water treatment facilities and other topics. Our workload has been heavy. The dedication and the effort put in by every single one of the consortium members has been exceptional. And now, as we look forward to the next couple of years, it's open as to what we could be working on. As the consortium was designed to be, the consortium is an evolving entity. It has the opportunity to be nimble in looking at different topics that are important to the state of Colorado around produced water, and continuing to be a unique resource to the different entities that we could provide recommendations to, whether that be the legislature, state agencies, local government, or even federal government, and some of the work that we're doing specific to Colorado. And I also think that we are unique amongst the different produced water consortiums in the country in that many of the produced water consortiums are very much research-based, and we utilize that research that is coming out of the different consortiums and some of the discussions that we are having as a consortium. But we also are unique in that we have a really strong policy arm to the work that we're doing and are able to provide recommendations and influence and be a resource to policymakers throughout the state. And so appreciate the work that everyone's been doing. I will take some time to open it up to different consortium members that may have ideas as well, but since I have the floor, I think I might share a few thoughts as we look forward to 2027 and beyond. And there's 3 topics that I think that we're asked to look at. 2 of them are ECMC asks or DNR asks as far as things that we could be looking at and working on over the next year or so. And then one, I think, uniquely comes from the trip we took down to Trinidad a couple of weeks ago. And so I'll start with that one. I've had the opportunity to take a number of trips down to the Trinidad area and the Raton Basin in Las Animas County. And, even in the inception of the consortium, had a good understanding that the produced water in that area is unique to different basins across the state. And I've heard in my trips, both as an ECMC commissioner and now as the chair of the Produced Water Consortium, the opportunities and challenges associated with produced water in the Raton Basin, as far as exploration of beneficial use outside of the oil field. I think there's opportunities and challenges from an operator perspective. I think there's opportunities and challenges from a community perspective, from a wildlife perspective, and from a local government perspective. I think we've seen studies indicating that, not all the water in every well in the Raton Basin is the same. Some of it, a significant amount of it, does have surface discharge permits associated with it. Some of it does not. Some of that is associated with economics. Some of that is associated with water quality. Much of that is associated with infrastructure. And so, one of the things that I would like to ask the consortium to work on is creating a discussion around opportunities and challenges with produced water in the Raton Basin, and seeing and exploring that area and that produced water and that situation, and seeing if we can come up with pragmatic and unique recommendations to being able to um, overcome the challenges that I think we saw when we were down there. And so that's the first thing I would like to throw out to the consortium, is something that I would like to see us working on. The second thought that I had, and really it is more of a directive from DNR, but we took a lot of time over the last year looking at centralized produced water treatment facilities and disproportionately impacted communities, and work through some really challenging discussions and presentations on that topic, that are a result of the legislation that created the consortium, but also created a blanket ban of disproportionately impacted or centralized produced water treatment facilities in disproportionately impacted communities. I think every one of the consortium members here understands the complexities of that. And we were able to come to consensus on a recommendation to DNR at the end of last year. That recommendation, while appreciated from DNR, was not able to go any further into proposed legislation. There was still some opposition and to the concept of doing something different than what was in the current statute. And so I think I'd like to see us take another dive into that and look a little further, not on removing necessarily the blanket prohibition, but rather looking at enhanced protections for disproportionately impacted communities associated with produced water treatment facilities, and not just centralized produced water treatment facilities, but commercial treatment facilities and other treatment mechanisms. And kind of take a little more time in educating not only ourselves, but maybe folks who are concerned about this topic, to see if we can come up with a more pragmatic solution to a blanket prohibition of centralized produced water treatment facilities in disproportionately impacted communities, by looking at enhanced protections that may be more protective than what a blanket ban may be. I think one of the reasons that I think this is important is recently we've seen ECMC's cumulative impacts report, the most recent one, that indicates that in the Piceance Basin, the amount of reuse and recycling of produced water has significantly declined over the last couple of years. And in fact, the primary reason for that in the Piceance Basin is the inability to put in the necessary infrastructure for some new developments that are occurring in different parts of the state, different parts of the Piceance Basin, that don't already have that produced water recycling and treatment infrastructure like other parts of the Piceance Basin has. And so that in turn has resulted in 100% freshwater being utilized in these new operations. And that, I'm not saying that that's the only catalyst. I think that there's other opportunities for looking at this, but I think that the result of that has become obvious as far as the amount of reuse and recycling that is occurring in the Piceance Basin. And so would love it if the consortium was interested in taking another crack at looking at enhanced protections for disproportionately impacted communities associated with centralized and commercial produced water treatment facilities. And so I throw that out there as an idea. And then the third one is as part of the produced water recommendations that the Produced Water Consortium made to ECMC, which ultimately resulted in the promulgation of rules that require a certain amount of reuse and recycling at different dates and percentages over the next, I don't know, 10 or so years. There's been some challenges and some concern that the operators may not be able to meet some of the reuse and recycling percentages and target dates without increasing emissions, which is required as part of HB 23-1242 and is required as part of the ECMC rules. I think we took a lot of time looking at different technologies and infrastructure and storage and transportation and all the different elements associated with that as we made recommendations associated with that. But I think there needs to be some more education and more evaluation and analysis done on that topic associated particularly with transportation, storage, treatment, and infrastructure associated with produced water reuse and recycling and the emissions associated with that, and seeing if the consortium can come up with ideas and recommendations on how to be able to meet the different reuse and recycling targets, utilizing different technologies and treatments and transportation and storage elements, and trying to kind of bridge that gap that either shows that it's possible, shows how it's possible, or shows that it may not be possible at certain percentages. And so I thought that may be a good topic for us to work on, and we've been asked to look at that as from ECMC. And so would like to throw that out there as well. So those are the three things on my mind as far as what we can work on. Of course, I think I just created three things that may take 3 to 5 years to work on, but this is a good group and we've accomplished a lot and I think can continue to accomplish a lot in a very timely fashion. And so, so those are my thoughts. Open to questions or comments on the three things that I brought forward, and then certainly would open it up to other folks who have ideas of things different than what I said. Harmony?
You're going to hear this statement from me a lot, but definitely a focus on the DJ Basin and other basins who are using the most fresh water. I am sitting on the Cumulative Impacts 2B working group and the Produced Water Emissions working group, and frustratingly read through the CI report and we need improvements in data and how we look at it, because I've always been afraid that we can increase recycling and also be increasing fresh water usage, but we're not even increasing recycling. We're just decreasing recycling percentages right now and increasing fresh water usage. And I think that the way that the data is given is not very clear and very helpful in making decisions, and would love to see continued improved data. And then I had a conversation this week with CDPHE air permitting and Select Energy, and the need to improve the mobile recycling permitting needs to be a big part of this conversation, because it plays into this whole centralized commercial treatment, but really the need for having mobile treatment and getting the air permitting being able to be streamlined over there. They're in the process of having their first mobile treatment permitted, but what CDPHE is saying, well, and what we're hearing from this conversation is that they would like data to be able to approve these mobile permits. And the industry's like, well, we need a permit to give you a year of the data so that we can have this. So talking about doing a pilot programming and streamlining this conversation, CDPHE will be sending an email back about what they exactly need to see for water testing. I'm just looking at my notes here. And then just making sure we're on the same page with emission calculations, how we're doing it, because of, again, that important not increasing emissions. But there are technologies out there. We just need to kind of work out some kinks, communication and data improvement, and collaboration across agencies and industry.
Thanks, Harmony. I think those things do tie into that third topic that I had brought up, and I think that it's all encompassing of the things that you had mentioned. And I've also heard about some of the challenges of the mobile treatment facilities and different permitting challenges, and so that's certainly part of the conversation. Jolie?
I believe Tessa's hand was up before mine. I could
All
go,
right,
but I just
Tessa?
wanted to.
Thank you very much. Sorry, folks. Tessa Sorensen, Energy Liaison, CDPHE, and governing body member. I am not on camera because I have been feeling ill. But I wanted to touch on a few of those things from you, John, and Harmony, and quite a few others. Three things specifically, a different three, but they're all applicable to all three. To Harmony's point about the air permit work going on in APCD, that is ongoing. We don't have a great understanding of which way to go on that. And the biggest problem and barrier to that is that not all produced water is the same. In fact, it's different on a case-by-case basis, and therefore the emissions are different on a case-by-case basis. So I think any studies that can be done are great, and anything that can be used for a general number. However, it also requires a lot of specifics about the particular operation and the produced water that's in there, and it is being worked and being figured out, but it's not there yet, and so I can't really comment as to the status of that other than it is being worked. I do want to mention that we heard a lot in the last meeting and a little bit in this meeting in terms of water discharge permits. And I just wanted to make a note that discharge permits are not under the purview of ECMC at all. That's actually a Water Quality Control Division jurisdiction, so that's all under WQCD within CDPHE. There are permits out there. Certainly the facilities you saw down there that they were talking about, the permits are there. Not all of it is permitted. You can't permit all that water to be out there because not all the water is the same even down there. And that includes for firefighting, by the way. Any discharges in the environment are under CDPHE, and there have been cases even in that area where there has been water with dissolved methane in it at higher levels than is allowed by the threshold, and so that's what that is. And that threshold is set by the Water Quality Control Commission in their rules. The last thing I wanted to mention was the DI prohibition on that. I think the best, I like all the ideas I've heard on commentary from the consortium on that in terms of basin-specific approaches and looks at that, looks at the DI communities themselves as well. I think that for this consortium, the best way to go is to give the best, clearest, but also flexible advice to ECMC and to the legislature in our reporting and our results to advise in what ways and areas is this preventing us from doing further produced water treatment. Keyword being treatment there. That's one of the biggest things. It's to reuse it, you need to store it, and to discharge it, you need to treat it. And sometimes to reuse it, you need to do both. And so that they can make the most informed decision. That's really, I think, the biggest mandate we have other than the percentage recommendations for recycling that we provide to ECMC. So I just wanted to mention that bit. So I think that covered all of it. Really appreciate all of the commentary and the conversation.
Jolie?
Thank you, Jolie Bronner. Great comments. Totally wanted that technical bit before I went. Thank you, Tessa. agreeing a lot with a lot of the comments I heard. Just want to reaffirm, I really love the basin by basin approach. I probably say this very often. Much like anything in our state, be it agriculture, be it energy, be it anything, it's very place based. The northwest corner of our state is different than the southeast corner of our state in everything that we do. And so I really want to focus on that. And also, it shows respect to the people who live there. Recognizing that the experience of someone in Baca County is different than someone who lives in Craig or even someone at the Raton Basin versus the DJ Basin, however we want to look at it, that shows we understand the communities we're working with. When we try a blanket approach, we are ignoring the diversity that makes up our state. And so I really want us to consider that when we're doing this. Additionally, I would really love, as we're talking about cumulative impacts and resources we have and pilot studies, we talk about examples from other states, but we tend to focus on some of the research and the great things that are happening, which is good. I'd like us to also take some time to look at lessons learned and some of the mistakes that have been made by other states and other commissions who are doing this work. I know there's been issues with cumulative impacts and some of the cleaning mechanisms and then releasing the water. And at high volumes, we have some radioactive leftover debris and things like that that builds up in the machinery. And they've learned to clean that, but maybe that should be part of what we're talking about. Like that transition that other states have done things, other companies have done things, they've learned lessons. Let's incorporate those so we don't make mistakes over and over again that have already been made when we can do this better. And then I can chat offline with some of the resources that were sent from other commissions and things like that. But really, I think also if we are going to bring back up the DI community conversation, which I'm willing to have, we need to talk about sincere community engagement that is not just public comment. How do we look at these regions and create hopefully a dialogue with that education piece that was brought up, making sure people understand, and then listening to the community. And instead of just opening a forum for people to bring their comments, doing intentional outreach in a way to make sure we're maybe reaching some of the unusual suspects who feel like they're no longer part of the process, but are definitely part of these communities and have a right to have a voice here. And then lastly, we keep hearing about how challenging all of these requirements, reporting, how challenging this is for industry. How do we make it easier? How do we help regulate? How do we talk about the forms? How do we do that? So I'm willing to listen too, because I keep hearing it's hard. Okay, cool. Let's talk about that and explore it as a topic. I also just gave us like 3 years worth of work too, it sounds like. But those were kind of my additions. Thank you, friends.
Thank you, Jolie. Barbara?
Yeah, thanks, Barbara Vasquez. I want to take us back to when we were trying to come to consensus about our recommendations to ECMC, and then the process that has gone on with ECMC since then. So you'll recall, for those who were on the consortium at that time or were listening in, we had some difference of opinion whether to have a statewide target. The argument being the DJ Basin is doing the most water use and produced water production versus a basin by basin target. Since then, we've had a couple of readouts from ECMC, difficulty in creating forms, data submission by operators. I think it would be very helpful to have a recap sometime early in our fiscal year 2027, John, that tells us from ECMC's perspective, what are the data? What does it tell us? Where are the problems? Are we on track to collect the data that we need to review how this is working as we think about follow-on recommendations? So that's one point. Second, going back to this basin by basin target, I also sit on the Colorado Water Conservation Board, but you don't have to sit on the board to know that we're in a record drought. And the worst of the drought is in the headwaters of the Colorado River. So that also argues for a basin by basin approach, not just oil and gas basin, but river basin. And we had had some discussion about overlaying oil and gas basins with river basins and looking at the total amount of water that was fresh water that was used by operators in that river basin. I think it would be of great value to go back to looking at that if that's possible, and then reviewing whether we're ready and able to make recommendations, oil and gas basin by basin, for targets for reuse and recycling. So those are my two asks. And that's 5 years worth of work. But I think the first one is, where are we in data collection and analysis? What have we learned? Second, can we do a basin by basin target setting with sensitivity to overlapping river basins given our extreme drought? And oh, by the way, the forecast for next year looks worse in terms of temperature. So whether we'll have the same snow drought or not, we don't know. But if it ends up all being rain and isn't captured as storage in the mountains, the state is in real trouble. So thanks.
Thanks, Barbara. Rick?
Thank you, Commissioner. First of all, I agree with all the statements that you made, Chairman Mesner, on the three topics. I'd like to expand on that a little bit. We did a great job as a group last year in agreeing and coming to a recommendation for mandatory reuse percentages for produced water and hydraulic fracturing moving forward, and made that recommendation to ECMC, and it eventually was incorporated. But there are other opportunities within oil and gas operations to utilize produced water. Now, it may have to be treated through some process such as RO to get it to a quality to where it could be used, but there's ongoing research into that to show it's possible. So one of the things I'd like for the consortium to consider moving forward is possibly making a recommendation that an operator that used volumes of that water in place of fresh water in other operations within the industry, those volumes be allowed to go toward their mandatory reuse goals. That would be one thing. The second thing is, and I agree with Jolie, that I think this coming year, we should focus on not only Colorado, but looking into there's some great research and peer-reviewed studies now coming out of work being done in New Mexico and Texas through their consortium, with treating water that is far more impaired than what we see in the DJ Basin, and producing very excellent quality water. Then there's a ton of research looking into assorted other testing other than just doing a water analysis, and like cell line study work and stuff like that. So I'd like us to reuse some of that data to where we could potentially look at more advanced treatments going forward to even further help supplement the existing water supplies in Colorado. Thank you.
Thanks, Rick. Nikki?
Good morning, everyone. Nikki Wells with the community. First, I would like to say I haven't seen you guys in a while, and it's nice to see a lot of your faces and just good conversation stepping back into this space. I want to give a shout out to all of us for the growth that we had over these last 3 years, coming together, making these recommendations. Today, hearing some of these recommendations that we have moving forward, I agree a lot on. You guys touched a lot on some of the stuff that I wanted to say. So I would just piggyback on Harmony and Clay and Barbara and everybody who had something to say about just bringing community back into this and just interacting more with community. I do want to say that we do need to go back into data. I remember when we first started this, a lot of the data that we were going off of was outdated. So just going back and like catching up and like really cracking a whip on holding them accountable for updated and true to the time data as we're moving forward. I agree with like partnering up with different states and saying, hey, what didn't work, what did work. Also regulating on cumulative impacted areas where we should protect more freshwater areas. And as you guys know, there is a climate crisis right now, and Colorado is in a drought. We're at 50%, and it's only going to get worse. Right now, in Colorado, I'm outside with a group of kids, and it's barely 10, and it's already almost 90 degrees out here. It's very, very hot. Um, I want to say this. I want to say that there isn't one disproportionate area. We're all affected by this, and we need to focus on all areas where, like you guys were saying, basin by basin, everybody is impacted. We shouldn't focus on one area, one corner. We need to focus on all four corners when we're doing this research. I would love to be a part of bringing community voice in, because that's where I stand, and that's why I'm here today, is to learn from you guys and work with you guys and then take it back to community. I've been doing a lot of community action tours around fracking and just getting to see what's going on these fracking sites. And it's really sad when I'm going to these fracking sites around community, and community doesn't know what's going on. They see the emission impacts from the trucks coming in and out, but they have no understanding of what's going on. And yeah, we do have a few people coming in with some public commenting, but it's not enough. So, everything that you were saying, I agree on. Thank you guys for your comments and your efforts. And let's continue to fight a good fight and do this good work. Thank y'all.
Thanks, Nikki. Irene?
Hi, Irene Andrus. First, yes, I agree with all three of the points that Commissioner Messner said. I want to really stress the idea about data. We are the end users of this system. We're the ones that know what kind of analysis we want to do, and I think we should be participating in what the front end of the user availability and accessibility to the data is. So I would really like if we could work together with ECMC and say, yes, this is functional, or no, I need this kind of functionality. I want to be able to retrieve this kind of a report. I know I've asked for this a few times, and I want to stress how important this is. You can't control what you can't measure. And we're talking theoretically right now, but we're not talking with the real data. So I know Harmony also brought this up. We're both data people. We both know that it's not efficient the way it's working right now. And it could be more efficient even for the producers if we were able to easily get to the data. Then the other thing I know Commissioner Messner brought this up, but I want to stress it too, that I would like to support that the commercial facilities have the same requirements in disproportionately impacted communities that non-commercial ones think. I think that that's a big gap that we should possibly be looking into. And then another thing I wanted to talk about was the possible use for infrastructure right now in the DJ, and that is the bulk of our problem. So if we can focus on the DJ as a deep dive, that would be, I think, very beneficial. It seems like that one of the problems with building out infrastructure is it's not financially advisable because the life expectancy of the production in an area doesn't justify the cost of the infrastructure. And maybe we need, instead of just an end of life of that infrastructure, we have to think of what are other areas where it can possibly be used. Is it possible it can be used for geothermal? Is it possibly to be used for cooling of different like data facilities? Is there brine mining that can take place? There are other uses for the infrastructure. It doesn't have to have an end of life at the time that the producing field has an end of life. So those are my main comments.
Thanks, Irene.
Thank you.
John?
Hey, good morning. John High with the ECMC. So I was just kind of scrolling through the rules, and I think it's important to also remember that we do have another rulemaking potentially coming up in 2028. And it seems like it's a long ways away, but that's only a couple years from now. And so I think, there will be an opportunity to address some of this in the rulemaking, but specifically it talks about tweaking the definition of produced water alternatives. And I think that could be something we could look at. Earlier this year, Hope had sent me an email from an operator that owns a frac sand plant where they have a process of washing the frac sand before they use it for fracking operations. And a portion of that water from that process they have reclaimed and is just in a reservoir that they have, and they're requesting to use that water in the fracking operations as part of their produced water recycling credit as a produced water alternative. And because it didn't meet that definition, unfortunately, they weren't able to use it. But it seems like that would have been a great opportunity for them to be able to use that water in a fracking operation because it's already used, it's sitting in a reservoir, it's not fresh water. And so I think kind of reimagining what a produced water alternative would be could increase the scope of what some of this water could be used in fracking operations that's not fresh water. So I think we should maybe try to expand our horizons on looking at what produced water alternatives are and how those can kind of fit into the picture. So that's all. Thank you.
Thanks, John. I'm going to jump over you, Harmony, and go to Kevin because he hasn't spoke yet. Kevin?
Thank you, Commissioner Messer. Kevin Chan. I am with the disproportionately impacted neighborhood and people of color. One of the things that we are kind of at a impetus today is really about data. We see data warehouses like it's popping up everywhere. We see that data is becoming more important. And data is kind of is the essential backbone for how we train AI models, things like that. I should know. I work in technology. I've seen such an advancement of these technologies and LLMs and things like that progress in the last 3 years. It's pretty insane where we're at right now. I'm still appalled at the kind of lagging behind of how we are not able to open source this data. We have platforms like Kaggle, which essentially allow data scientists access to government data. We're talking about population data. We have air quality on there. We have a lot of other things on there. I think that the consortium, as one of its duties, should make this data available. We can use tools like Glean. This is an AI tool where it reads over a repository of data, of reports, of database information. I use this personally at work. I'm not advocating for it whatsoever, but there are tools like that that centralizes the data. You can ask questions of it, and will synthesize analysis. It will even create slideshows for you. I literally used it yesterday to create a slideshow after a hackathon with my work. So what I'm trying to say is that I get where we're coming from. I also feel that in order to have meaningful conversations, we have to have meaningful conversations with data that is available to the public, that they can use natural language to talk to and about what is impacting their neighborhood. Because we can give them the data or we cannot give them the data, and they'd be either overwhelmed with information or just not have the information to come together with. We need a middle ground where we're coming to them saying, here's the tools. There's tools like Tableau. There's tons of things out there. And with all this talk about AI and its impacts, I think that we can utilize some of it for the good of people instead of just a bunch of profit. We need to start having some real meaningful conversations around how we can distribute and democratize this data. Essentially, is where I'm getting at. And I completely agree with Irene and Jolie. And this is one of the problems I've been having with since I've been on the consortium is trying to get this data, trying to ask questions of it, trying to measure it. And we are at this point where data collection is cheap. We can buy sensors, we can buy pH sensors for water quality, we can buy all types of things and have this transmit data tens of miles away to a centralized location and have real-time analytics on this stuff. So I think that as a consortium, we need to start talking about this in a real perspective manner and opening this data up. Anyways, thank you.
Thanks, Kevin. Zahi?
Thank you. I'm a little bit frustrated because I hear everybody's talking about data, and I don't know sometimes what data we are talking about, and you cannot blame me for not understanding data for somebody that works in academia. But just to what just Kevin said, data is expensive. Some of the data for produced water is expensive. We did 2 years ago a big piloting in the Permian Basin, and just to generate water quality data cost us $500,000. In really to know what's in this water. So data is not simple. The fact that we can do AI and different things, data, it's not a simple thing. And data changes and water quality changes all the time. So data of today probably have very short, shelf life because tomorrow this data changes and water quality changes, and we know that will change over time. So overall, we have technologies and we know how to treat water and we know what are the contaminants that's in the water and we know what technologies can be used and how we connect them in trains of processes. And so what I see as somebody that runs, design and build and operate large pilot systems is what we need is pilots and testing things in the field, and even pilots come in different sizes and different shapes and different technologies. But while we know what technologies are the best candidates, going and pulling information from what people in New Mexico have done or other states have done doesn't mean that they are applicable to Colorado and again, in Colorado, we talked about different basins and different basins have different water. And so I think, from meeting with people that want to invest in technologies, what I hear is that not only that we need data on water quality, we need also a lot of data on the economics of this, because if there's no buyer for this water, who's going to pay for these technologies. And so again, I think DJ is a good place to do piloting, but I think that the DJ has buyers nearby that will take this water and do something beneficial with this water. I'm more concerned about more remote locations that then taking the clean water and transferring it for beneficial use for somebody to pay for them is not so simple. So I think we need to be clear what data and what people want to collect and what to transmit or share with the public, but to remember that data is changing all the time. So.
Thanks, Zahi. Appreciate that. Harmony?
I want to make a special bullet point on data around truck emissions. This has been something that's been in the legislation. It's trucking is one of the top concerns for communities. ECMC will be that's APCD, CDPHE. CDPHE will be like, oh, things actually the RAC is doing that. I'll go to a RAC meeting. They're like, we're not collecting this. Tessa and I were on a call for the cumulative impacts working group where we're starting to figure out ways to come to closer to calculating emissions, maybe, or guesstimating emissions. But I really think that this needs to be the charge of all the groups, not just pointing to this one, to this one, to this one, because right now no one is capturing it. And I think it's a really important part of the puzzle for a lot of reasons.
Thanks, Harmony. Did you get all that, Hope?
I did. There were themes that were pulled out. Let me know if you want to hear them now, or I'll synthesize them at a later point in the meeting.
Yeah, I think probably the best thing to do is to give you some time to synthesize it. I think there were some themes. I think that there was definitely some elements that tied into a number of different topics that I think came up that we may be able to synthesize into 4 or 5 topics, or 3 or 4 topics, or however you think would be best to synthesize it.
Thank you, Chair Messner. I did have a question for Rick and a question for Kevin. May I ask them now?
Of course.
Rick, you mentioned use of produced water in oil and gas operations. As most people know, oil and gas operations is not my background. Would you be able to provide me a list of where water is used in oil and gas?
Yes,
I see. Okay. For those of you who didn't hear, because I talked over him, Rick said yes. Kevin, you mentioned some AI tools that you used. I wrote them down, but I don't know if I'm spelling them correctly, like Glean and Cable and Tableau. Would you be able to send me those or text me the correct spellings?
Yes, I could email you the links as well, and a short description of what I use those for.
Oh, that would be fabulous. Thank you. That's all, Chair.
Thanks. So do folks feel like that's a good path? I think this is a path that we've utilized in the past where we kind of have a brainstorm session. We confuse Hope. Hope tries to get us organized and synthesized, and then she brings it back to us to look at and kind of finalize that as a plan moving forward. Barbara?
Just a side comment, Hope may not be the only one confused.
Well, I mean, we could try to hash it out right now and try to synthesize it amongst us, but I think at least from
I'm
what
not
I heard from
suggesting
folks,
that.
yeah, I think that there
Yeah,
was enough
I'm not
themes.
suggesting that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so hopefully that all brings it together in a written format that we're able to look at and synthesize, and then ask more questions and maybe finalize it at the next meeting as a plan of action moving forward. And does that make sense to you, Hope?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I think it does. I also wanted to just kind of give a heads up to the consortium members. The September meeting, as far as right now, will be focused on data. And so what I'm working on now is looking at the data available from the cumulative impacts reports and looking at what new data is coming out of the ECMC produced water rules, such as vehicle miles traveled. So that will be the focus of our next meeting. And Chair Messner, yes, I can look at what has been said today and kind of give us a roadmap, whether that's 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years. Have we decided kind of on the time frame yet?
I think maybe synthesize the information that you heard, develop some themes, and then lay it out and see what's a realistic timeline for it. Because I think, the data conversation, you know, is important for the Raton Basin conversation. It's important for the DJ Basin conversation. It's important for the disproportionately impacted community conversation. It's important for um, for the kind of emissions associated with infrastructure, transportation, treatment, and storage of produced water for reuse and recycling. Um, and so I see these themes in all of them, and so but I do think that getting it down and then laying it out and being realistic with the time frame and also realistic with the number of meetings that it will take to do it. And if, I know that we've got a certain number of meetings that we have anticipated right now. I would encourage us to look at additional meetings if necessary, understanding that currently we don't necessarily have the funding available for that, but I would like to know what the delta is in order to get this in a more timely fashion than what our current meeting budget might allow. Um, because I would like to be able to chase some funding associated with that. So we can get moving along with some things. So
I really appreciate that clarity. Thank you, Chair Messner.
we'll go Kevin, then Matt.
Hope, if I may, I'd like to clarify what I mean by access to the data. Whatever reports we collect today with all the information about how much was trucked and things like that. Essentially, I would like access to the database, or at least like how we can open source access to the database, whether or not like that be the database administrator doing a dump on the data and then we posting it to Google Drive or Tableau, like I said, not Tableau, Kaggle, like I said, which essentially is just a place where you can put the data. It shouldn't cost too much. We've already collected it, as mentioned, and it's really about getting access and insight into what have we been collecting, is it enough? And then we can cross-reference this with existing data sets from Kaggle or whatnot on temperature and join this and essentially look at this from a larger perspective than just our reports that we've been collecting. So really specific about just getting the access that we have, the data that we have, and then just putting it somewhere that everybody in the consortium can access, and eventually we can just give it access to the community, the taxpayers who we're essentially paid for this data.
Thanks, Kevin. Matt.
Yeah, thank you. I think that our meeting was started out by a presentation from Rick that talked about what they're doing and what he's doing in a federal stakeholder group that is similarly situated, and they're breaking into small subgroups. And I think with the amount of work that we're talking about and with the number of participants we have here, is that a possibility that we would break into subgroups and take on some of these issues?
Yeah, thanks, Matt. It's certainly something that has been contemplated through the life of the consortium. And so, yes, there is the possibility to do that. There's some posting and open meetings things that are associated with that as a consortium, but not insurmountable by any means. So I think that, as we look at this and maybe the right path to look at that, could be to have Hope synthesize the conversation that we had today, understand the scope of what we're talking about, and then have kind of a plan of action on what items need subgroups or what items don't need subgroups, or what's the most effective kind of mechanism for accomplishing those goals. And so, but subgroups is certainly something that we've talked about, and I think probably needs to get utilized sooner than later in some of these topics. So.
You're muted.
I was saying something very profound, but Hope, do you need anything else from us?
I don't think so. I really appreciate all of the great ideas that have been shared. If you haven't shared an idea or something comes up and you need to clarify what you've said today, please let me know.
Great. Well, I appreciate this everyone being here and providing thoughts, and I don't want to take up any more time today. If I think we've got a good place where we can step aside, get some information, and then distribute that to the consortium members once it gets synthesized as a draft, and certainly not a final product until we get together and have a discussion on it. So if there is nothing else, then I'll adjourn the meeting today. Thanks, everyone, and hope you have a great weekend.